Good evening from Israel, good morning from Australia, and good afternoon from California, which we'll talk about in a minute. My name is Dr. Tova Goldfein. This is TMS RoundTable Clinic. Rose and I, for many, many years, 20, 25 plus, have been involved in this work. We're clinicians, and we help people with chronic pain, autoimmune disease, and anxiety. And we help them recover and heal. And we come to our show. We bring our show on every Monday night. It's number 142. I think, Ken, you're number 142. And we bring guests that help inspire and educate. And we know the possibility of recovery. And we hope that you will be with us tonight and see the possibilities. Rose, I'll let you introduce our guest.
Thank you, Tova. Yes, we've been doing this for a long time now, haven't we?
Yeah.
Now, you know, audience, when we actually introduced our guests, we want you to realize that there are people out there that can help you. And wherever part of the world you're in, there are people. And unfortunately, often people will continue to go to clinicians that actually don't look at the mind-body connection. So that's why we continually bring people to our show so that you can see that there are other alternatives besides just what you've been doing. Now, Ken is very interested in health anxiety. Oh, sorry, Ken Goodman.
Ken Goodman.
America.
Here I am, Ken Goodman. There you go.
That's right. Welcome.
What a great name. What a great name.
I got carried away. Now, Ken he's even written a publication for people that have got an emesis problem. That is a fear of vomiting. So,
Emetophobia.
Yes, there you are. Now, you yourselves may not have it, but you may be aware of someone who has. And often people who have this problem are a little bit claustrophobic, but also they're afraid to go out and they're afraid of eating. So there's a whole lot of comorbidity with this. So, you know, if you are interested and you know someone, just be aware that help is out there. But Ken, welcome to TMS Roundtable.
What's probably more applicable to this talk is this, which is these are CDs. This is the old version. People can download it actually. It's a 12-hour audio course that includes all types of anxiety, PTSD, panic, health anxiety, social anxiety, everything. Amazing. That would probably be more applicable to your audience.
Probably, but at the same time, this phobia is not very well recognized, the emetic phobia. So that's why I brought it up, because people don't realize that there is such a phobia, and they may even have it and not recognize it. So I thought, you've got this little extra bit in your what do you call it, Tova?
Library. Toolbox.
Library. Yeah.
It's a very unknown phobia. Most therapists have never heard of it, and yet it's actually a very I'm not going to say common, but there are thousands and thousands of people who have
exactly,
and no one's ever heard of it.
That's right. But you see, they concentrate on the other OCD issues and don't name that, and you've named it. And that's what I thought when I reviewed what your work you did and things like that before you came on. I thought it's an important thing to actually mention, because people may have it and not realize that that's why they're staying at home. That's why they're not eating out. That's why they're curtailing the amount of food they eat.
Yeah.
And and once they recognize it and recognize what they're doing, they then have control. And this is why we've got Ken here. So go ahead, Ken.
No one likes vomiting, but the people who have emetophobia are very fearful of it, and it changed their behaviors, how they interact with people and what they do in life. And it's a very debilitating phobia, actually.
And it's a secret one.
Yeah.
You know, there's certain things that like bulimia, another secret sort of thing? Because
I
it's
do
not.
actually have, I have several patients who have emetophobia and they have health anxiety.
Yeah.
And health anxiety is what we're going to talk about today. But there are some crossovers. Usually people with emetophobia have something else. They have also maybe panic or they have social anxiety. But I have quite a few that do have health anxiety.
Mm, mm.
Which
So
is very similar to what the two of you treat, except it's yours is focused mostly or exclusively on pain, whereas the people that I work with have pain, but they also experience lots of other physical symptoms that they cannot tolerate.
yeah,
Let me preface what I've learned in this business, especially my working with Rose for all these years, is that isn't it true that usually there's anxiety before the pain, and the pain is, especially
yeah,
chronic pain, is a result of the anxiety not being accepted or dealt with or understood or looked at or recognized. Would you see that as sort of a timeline, that if people don't look at the anxiety or accept it, it'll turn into a chronic pain because the body's um, there's a conflict. How would you say to that, Ken?
Margaret, to me,
Yeah.
well, anxiety can manifest itself in many, many ways. You can
that's
have a
right. Yeah,
parent with social anxiety and who has 3 kids, and one has no, you know, anxiety disorder at all. Another one develops health anxiety, and the other one goes on and experiences chronic pain. So it can manifest itself in many different ways, and it could it could be started in many different ways. So sometimes people will have anxiety from childhood. Other times they're fine throughout their life. A woman has a baby, and now she realizes, wow, I am now responsible for this infant. That is a tremendous amount of responsibility. And then she starts to worry about, well, what if I die? And now I'm going to leave my infant, motherless. And so she starts to develop health anxiety. So it can come in a variety of different ways at different times in people's lives.
yeah. It's manifested differently, isn't it? Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. But the science is that the amygdala is sort of activated, isn't it? And the vasovagal system is activated. So, and then it comes out in a different angle, virtually, doesn't it? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there's in anxiety disorders, there is a fight or flight response. And people with anxiety will be flooded with anxiety in the form of maybe physical symptoms as well as racing thoughts, and it will affect their behaviors. So with health anxiety, someone might, for instance, they hear a news report about a famous person who was diagnosed with cancer. And then that same day, they feel like something here, like a lump. I'm like, wait, what is that? And they might start to feel a rush of anxiety, like, oh, this person had cancer. What is this? Maybe I'll die of cancer. And then maybe they'll start Googling their symptoms. And then when they Google their symptoms, they start to read about all these different horrible things. And then they start doing all these checking behaviors, checking here, and maybe pushing, and they start pushing on their neck, for instance, and they push on their neck so much that actually it starts to swell up a bit. And now there's something really there. And now they think, oh no, what is that? Now maybe I have to contact the doctor and I have to go to the doctor. And so it can really spiral out of control. And it's probably similar to what you all deal with people with pain. So I have clients
The
who
same thing. Yeah.
have pain as well, where they can experience pain anywhere and begin to worry that it's something catastrophic. So if they have a headache, it's a brain tumor. You know, they might feel pain in their stomach, and maybe it's stomach cancer. You know? And the stomach is a very common place for people to actually experience anxiety. One of the most common places to experience anxiety is in the stomach, the gut, which has the second most nerve endings to the brain. And so people will feel all sorts of physical symptoms. But if you have health anxiety, you're going to misinterpret those physical symptoms as something catastrophic, as something fatal, when all it really is gas
Good point. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Would you talk about catastrophizing now in that context? No?
Sure,
Yeah.
it's very normal for people to worry. Everyone worries, everyone gets at least a passing thought. So if you wake up one day and you feel something under your armpit, you might wonder, you have a passing thought, oh, what is that? But the person with health anxiety will not only say, what is that? He'll actually imagine what it could be. Now, an average person might also imagine what that could be, a person without health anxiety. But if you have health anxiety, well, you not only imagine what it could be, you'll then obsess about it all day long. And you'll begin to create stories in your mind of what would happen if you were diagnosed with something fatal and what would happen to your family. And then maybe you would compulsively check or go online. And so it becomes a much bigger story in your imagination than the person who has no health anxiety at all. For them, it's just, oh, I don't know what that is, but whatever, I'm going to go live my life.
Yeah. And, when you think about it, it fills the whole mind, doesn't it? It fills the whole space. So there's no room for anything else.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
And that's what's so catastrophic about it in a way, isn't it? That they've got no space to just live an ordinary part of their lives. And as a clinician, it's sort of hard to see. It's sad.
And that
Ken.
becomes their life. Their focus is on preventing catastrophic things from happening. That becomes the goal. They need to prevent it.
Yeah.
They don't want to be the person that missed the symptom and then finds out later that this was something preventable. So everything becomes, the focus then is, I have to figure everything out. I need to know right away. And I have to make sure that the doctor's on top of it and that we know what this is to prevent anything horrific from happening.
But then they're firing, and what they're firing neurologically, they're firing this, like that story about the white elephants, or like that if you want to see a pink car, you're going to find a pink car. Like we're back to that cycle.
Yeah.
Right. You're going to look for a thing. If you're looking, whatever you're going to look for, you're going to find something. You're going
That's
to find
right.
it.
Yes.
Right. I
yes.
remember, when I was in the market for buying a tree, I want to buy a tree for my front yard. So I'm driving around and suddenly I'm noticing every tree in the neighborhood. And I never paid attention before. Or when I'm driving around, when I'm looking to buy a car, now I'm looking at every car. What is that? What is that? And so when you are preoccupied with something, you're going to find it. You're going to see things that other people don't see.
That's right. Now, Ken, when we talk about that, we now have to help patients to actually shift their mindset. Now, in shifting their mindset, would you talk a little bit about that and about the fact, when we were talking earlier, we were talking about the cynicism of people going week after week after week to different doctors, they're advised to, this person says, well, this doctor's good, and they go there and then they go to another doctor, etc., etc. So when they get to the office, they're cynical about how they can change. Could you talk a little bit about that, as you did with me the other day? Because I thought it was very helpful for our audience to sort of
Yeah,
see that.
when someone has an anxiety disorder, oftentimes they will seek out a therapist. And everyone on their profile, on their website, will say that they treat anxiety disorders. They'll say they treat depression, anxiety, and a whole host of things. But if you have an anxiety disorder, my best recommendation would be to find someone who specializes in the treatment of anxiety. Because although all therapists will say they treat it, they don't all necessarily treat it well. And you can easily find out who specializes in anxiety just by going to their website. If they talk about everything under the sun, they don't specialize in it. But if their website is really specifically about anxiety disorders and OCD, then you at least know that that person has some knowledge and expertise in treating anxiety disorders. So oftentimes people will see therapists and they won't get better. And so they'll come to me with a great deal of, they won't have very much hope. They just won't feel very hopeful in the process because they've been struggling for years, maybe even decades, without getting better. And so they don't feel very confident coming into the process. But I tell people, you don't have to be confident, you just have to do the work. And part of the work is learning how to change your cognitions, learning how to change the way you think, you know, also learning how to change the way you behave. So that's what CBT is, cognitive behavioral therapy. Help change the way you think, help change the way you behave. And by doing those two things, it helps you feel better.
Where do the feelings come in? Where do you bring in the, because like I can think my way to getting better, but then I've got my feelings and my emotions and the way that I treat myself. How do you tie that on? Because I'm sure it comes up for you in your work.
So the feelings that people will experience it in the forms of anxiety, like they're feeling anxious. But they also, when you have health anxiety, often will feel it physiologically, like you'll feel it in your stomach. There's so many physical symptoms of
So it brings up
anxiety.
fear. I'm going to interrupt you. So you have the fear. So we're talking about the fear and the anger and the lack of, and the sadness and the rage, like Dr. Sarno will say, may he rest in peace. Like, where do you bring that into your work? Because I'm sure it comes up.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you have to understand that these feelings are normal. Physical symptoms are normal. You have to understand that adrenaline, what the primary hormone, cortisol, causes anxiety, will produce many physical symptoms. So whether it's racing heart, tightness in your chest, difficulty breathing, lightheadedness, sweating, um, stomach is shaking, trembling, jitters, all sorts of stomach issues, feeling off balance. These are just a few.
So how do we calm down the fear? Because all these things they're real. Ken, they're real. I'm having real symptoms. What do I do with my fear?
Those physical symptoms are real. You are feeling those things. Those things are happening. Those things are definitely happening. But the thoughts in your imagination, those are lies and distortions.
Like
What
that.
you are thinking about those physical symptoms is a misinterpretation of what those physical symptoms are. You are feeling those physical symptoms. Those are there, you know? So when people feel something in their chest, they're feeling that physical symptom, but they're misinterpreting what that physical symptom represents. So you have to accept the physical symptom. You got to accept it. You can't make it go away. It's like it's raining outside right now in Los Angeles. Believe in me, it's raining. It's unbelievable. It's raining. But there's nothing I can do. I can't stop the rain.
But their fear of getting wet is part of
Can't
the
stop the
anxiety.
rain. You can't stop the physical symptoms from happening. You have to accept them. And by accepting them,
Tell me about accepting them. Tell us about accepting them, because this is one of the blockages for patients, isn't it? That acceptance. Can you talk a little bit more about that? That yes, it's all right to accept them. You've got to accept that you've got back pain every time your mother-in-law comes to visit. So
yeah. So
yeah.
I remember hearing a story about a guy. He was a mountain climber in Northern California, and he loved to climb mountains. But one day he had some accident. I don't even know what kind of accident it was, but he ended up paralyzed from the waist down. Had to have some surgeries, go through rehab, and he was eventually able to get his life back, but he was still paralyzed. There was nothing that could be done about that. He had to accept the fact that he was paralyzed. There was nothing that could be done. He had to accept it. And by accepting it, he was able to form some sort of semblance of his life back. Wasn't the same. It wasn't the same. At some point, he wanted to learn how to climb mountains again. Well, how do you climb mountains if you have no use of your legs? Well, perhaps you build up your body, your upper body. Perhaps you find different kinds of ropes and contraptions. I'm not a mountain climber, I don't know. But he was able to figure it out. And if you go to Yosemite, there's a picture of him on top of a mountain and it's sitting in a wheelchair with Half Dome in the background. And he was able to climb mountains, but it began with acceptance. It began with accepting his situation in life. This is what it is. I have to accept it.
Great.
Now, the good news for people with health anxiety is that by accepting your symptoms, those symptoms will begin to subside. They weren't going to change for someone with a medical condition like this man I was talking about who was paralyzed. But when you have health anxiety and you accept those physical symptoms will subside. The problem that people with health anxiety have is they're fighting it. They're trying to stop the physical symptoms. And when they don't stop, you get worried. Oh my gosh, I can't stop them. Now they're going to feel more anxious because they're not stopping. Yeah. And that's exactly the opposite of what you want.
So the key to acceptance is to let go of trying to cure it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Let go of trying to figure out what it is. Why am I having this physical symptom? Mm-hmm. And B, accepting that it's there. I mean, it doesn't mean you ignore everything. I mean, there's a balance. There are people that never go to the doctor. And that's a wrong thing too. You don't want to go in the other extreme. You have to find a balance between addressing your physical health and your mental health. So you can't ignore everything completely. If there is a problem that you're experiencing, a medical issue, a physical issue, and it doesn't go away or it gets worse, then go to the doctor. Go to the doctor. Maybe all you need is an over-the-counter medicine. Most of the people, I talk to people with health anxiety all the time, and the vast majority of the physical symptoms just go away on their own without doing anything. They're transient physical symptoms, and they just go away. And sometimes they go away and another one appears. Right. Or it goes away after another one.
Arno has a name for that.
Oh yeah, what's that?
I'm blanking on the name. Help me. It's because we're not getting to the cause of the problem. It's he calls it because symptom imperative, because you're not getting to the cause, so we keep putting a Band-Aid on, and that's what Rose and I find, and we help them. We try to treat the person like you and not the condition, because you're seeing people with same health anxieties, and not everybody's experiencing OCD the same way, and so we end up treating that person, because people, every individual is so different in their healing, as you know. I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
But I just want to address.
You can have let's say a pain in your eye, like just a minor pain in your eye, including with like an itch. Now
I got one right now.
Right? Now you're looking in the mirror and you're looking like, what is there? Why do I feel this? And you're thinking, oh my God, is this a brain aneurysm? Am I gonna have a stroke? And then you have it for a day, but then suddenly you find something going on in your knee. Now you're focusing on your knee, and suddenly the eye thing goes away.
Yeah.
Because now you're focusing on your knee, because whatever you tend to focus on is going to grow.
Right. So I want to address the two questions. Patty, who's a wonderful visitor to our shows for the last almost 3 years, she says exposure therapy is the cure. Anxiety is a side effect symptom to fear. So what do you think of that, Ken?
Exposure therapy is really important. With all.
So how do you expose a person to back pain?
Okay, but exposure therapy is not.
I think that's the PRT work is exposure. Somatic tracking is the exposure therapy, Rose.
It's
sure.
Exposure therapy. Think about exposure therapy. Let's say someone has a fear of elevators. In order to overcome the fear of elevators, they got to get on the elevator. Well, if someone has a fear of cancer, you don't get cancer to overcome that. I mean, someone has a fear of death, you don't die. So there's other types of exposures that you do to help a person overcome that. Yeah. Right. So, but that's not the only thing. That's one piece of the anxiety puzzle when it comes to health anxiety. In the beginning, I actually want people not to expose themselves to things because it's so triggering. They need to have some time to sort of calm down.
Point.
When you have a fear of, let's say, elevators, you can do it step by step. You can say, okay, well, the first step is going to be I'm going to look at pictures of people inside elevators. I'm going to do that every day. And then I'm going to look at videos of people inside elevators. I'm going to look at that every day. And then I'm going to go to an elevator. I'm going to stand there and I'm just going to look as people get in and out. And then I'm going to walk to the elevator and I'm going to put one foot in and have one foot out. I'm just going to stand there. Okay, now I'm going to go in the elevator and I'm going to hold the button. I'm just going to hold it for like a minute. I'm not going to let the door close.
Good point.
But eventually you have to let the door close and eventually you got to get up. So you can do it step by step. You can do it gradually. But with health anxiety, the problem is the disorder seeks you out. It's not like I'm going to the elevator. I have control over the situation. With health anxiety, you can get one symptom one day, you get another symptom another day. You see a Facebook post about a GoFundMe account with someone who has ALS. I mean, the triggers are coming at you every day. And you can't do it in a step-by-step fashion in that way. So it becomes more challenging.
I was thinking about a redback spider. I think I'd still be scared of it, even, or a snake.
When it wouldn't cause you pain or like to lose.
No, but the exposure of it wouldn't help me, is what I'm saying.
So you make a good point, Patty, about that. And I want to just mention Kim's. I'd like you to address that, Ken, because it's a real question that we hear from clients.
How to control your thinking and fear when anxiety is off the charts? Well, even when someone, when I work with people, either I have health anxiety classes that I run, and then people can use this self-help program, and people could really get so much benefit from learning not only how anxiety manifests itself and the strategies of how to overcome anxiety, but sometimes when the anxiety is overwhelming, everything that you've learned is out the window. Like you just forget everything because
that's the same with
the
snakes.
amygdala.
If you see
What's
one,
that?
I said that's the same with snakes. You can know all about them, but you're walking in the bush and you see one, your hair stands on end again. And I mean that's the same with health anxiety, isn't it? And a new symptom.
So this part of the brain is called the prefrontal cortex, and it's in charge of logical thinking and reasoning. And then behind the eyes in the midbrain, there's a piece called the amygdala. It's the shape of an almond, and that's in charge of emotional reactions. It just reacts. They call it the primitive brain. So if there's like a lizard on the ground and you clap your hands loud, the lizard jumps. So that the amygdala just reacts, and it processes the information so much faster than this prefrontal cortex. So much so that if something happens, the amygdala will hijack the entire brain and you can't think clearly. It just, like you have no use of your brain because the amygdala is taken over. And that's why sometimes people who feel like they are very logical are now can't think logically. So I've worked with people who were doctors, nurses, CEOs of companies, lawyers. They're very thoughtful people, but it doesn't matter. When the amygdala fires off and takes over the whole brain, you can't even think clearly. So that's why this is a process of really learning how to deal when things surface, when you are triggered. It's like doing any new skill. So whether you're learning how to ski, or you're learning how to type, or you're learning how to ballroom dance, any skill is going to take time and practice and patience and learning how to do it. And it's no different with this.
And I like to say to these, these people, go ahead. I wanted you to continue, please. And
no, I was just going to say, people with health anxiety have to remember that the triggers can come at any moment, at any time. And so they have to be ready for them. And so
how are they ready? How can Kim be ready?
Well, you have to have, think about a game of chess. When you're playing chess, you have an opponent. And someone who's a good chess player is sort of anticipating what the opponent is going to do and then what you're going to do. And you're sort of a couple moves ahead. And you have to start thinking, okay, what is anxiety strategy? Because anxiety has a strategy. What's anxiety strategy? And what's anxiety going to do? Okay, now what am I going to do? So when anxiety does this, I'm going to do this. But it's not easy, and you have to learn how to respond, because you're going to get an initial reaction. Like, we can't help our initial reaction. You're going to feel a rush of anxiety, maybe a rush of thoughts. You're going to get a physical reaction, and that's normal. Like, there's nothing you can do about that. It's
Yeah.
how you're going to respond to your reaction. Like, what are you going to?
Good
How are you
point.
going to respond to
When you
anxiety?
response is like a key to keeping calm and getting through it in a calm way without triggers.
Right. So when you're working with your clients, patients, and they experience some pain, how are they supposed to respond to the pain? You have to respond in some way. I would imagine some degree of acceptance. Okay, I'm accepting it. But then, I don't know, you tell me. I mean, I know how.
Especially if it's neuroplastic pain, that it's just your brain protecting you, and
Mhm.
you get an opportunity now to bring safety. That's what you're doing. You're teaching people to accept and bring safety. And
Yeah. And you're really trying not to focus. You're shifting your focus away from the physical sensations, whether it's pain or
Yeah.
whatever it is,
Yeah.
and
So when
away
my
from your thoughts to focusing on living your life.
yeah, so when my mother-in-law comes and my back just goes out on me, but I haven't made the connection to my mother-in-law, but my back seems to randomly go out on me, and then at a later date, this my left knee is just playing up on me so badly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to do with myself, and I have to go and lie down.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
how do you make the connection to the emotional aspect of why the person's got health anxiety is what we're just trying to figure out.
Yeah. So you're talking about there's a underlying maybe
Issue. Yeah.
subconscious um, trauma of some sort that they have to come to terms with. They have to talk it out. They have to deal with, right? That
That's
has
right.
caused this, right?
Mm.
And with health anxiety, it can be that, or it may not. It may not.
Oh,
It
okay.
could be that,
So,
maybe the person grew up with someone who had cancer in the family and they saw the person going through chemo, right? But it doesn't have to be that. There could be no trauma at all, and the person has health anxiety simply based on their obsessions about and their behaviors, their compulsions about health. So, for instance, I had a client who was in her early 40s, and after a few months in therapy, she disclosed something which she's never told anyone, and that she says her tongue is too big, and that she's very embarrassed. And we talked about how long have you felt this way? How long you thought about this? And he said, well, when she was a young girl, she was looking in the mirror and she was making faces just like kids do. And they look in the mirror and they make faces. And she looked stuck at her tongue and she thought, oh my God, my tongue is enormous. And then she started thinking and worrying, like, are the kids going to make fun of my tongue? Like, will they see it? Will they make fun of it? And so that caused her to change her behavior. So she wasn't talking as much to her friends because she worried that they would notice. And then she started worrying, well, what if I like trip over my tongue, stutter, And so she started talking less. And then she had a thought, well, could I choke on it? Like, would I choke on my tongue? And so she never told anyone. So she created this story in her imagination, and she just obsessed on it for decades until she told me. So I said, well, stick out your tongue. Let me see your tongue. So she stuck it out. It was the exact same size as everyone else's tongue. But she just created a story. So the story, I guess, can become the trauma, and you just replay it over and over. But it wasn't because of any traumatic thing that happened. It was because she created the story.
wouldn't
But it
someone,
doesn't mean that there can't be trauma in people's life. There could be, and if that's the case, you have to deal with that. All I'm just saying is that it doesn't have to be. There could be a genetic predisposition to anxiety that manifests itself in health anxiety. So there doesn't have to be a trauma, but there could be.
Okay. So the fact that the amygdala is sort of like being firing could be genetic
Yes.
in your theory. So people could be born with an enlarged.
They're born with a genetic predisposition to anxiety, just like some people are born with
Okay. So they can't be.
genetically gifted at math. Some people are better at sports. Some people have a calm predisposition. That some people are more anxious and stressed. And so everyone's sort of born with a certain set of genes that manifests itself in different ways, and those genes can be expressed anytime. So sometimes it starts in childhood, but other times they're fine, they're okay, and then something triggers it. And it could be a trauma that triggers it, and then all of a sudden it takes hold. And once anxiety starts, it can take on a life of its own.
And again, that's another opportunity. I mean, to accept this is what. How can I serve myself with this characteristic? How can I, use this to channel this characteristic, the sensitivity, or this leaning towards this anxiety or this sensitive. Right? Wouldn't you agree, Rose?
Well, I don't know, because if you're genetically short, you're not going to be able to genetically grow.
But you have to accept that you're short. So it's another. It's like
that's right. Yeah.
Well, yes. If you are genetically short, there's nothing you can do about it.
So if you've got a big amygdala,
right?
You've got to accept that you've got a big amygdala.
But if you have a predisposition to being anxious, that is definitely something that you can overcome and you can get better with. You might still have anxiety periodically throughout your life because anxiety is a normal emotion. But there's definitely something through therapy that can help people with anxiety reduce the intensity, reduce the frequency of it, and so and learn to live a happy life in spite of having some minor flare-ups, for instance. Yeah. Well, so there is hope. There's hope out there, and there's some good websites too. So the Anxiety and Depression Association of America, the Anxiety and Depression Association of America, I'm on the board. It's adaa.org, and they have a lot of great resources, a lot of wonderful videos and webinars, and self-help stuff and books. And there's a self-help online group that they have, and there's a Find a Therapist search. And the same thing with International OCD Foundation, IOCDF.org. So these organizations are out there, and you can find therapists through those organizations and get a lot of good self-help material.
What happens when the self-help doesn't work?
Well, self-help can be extremely helpful, but it's always nice to have the guidance of someone who is an expert sort of taking you along, right? And if the self-help doesn't work, you need to find someone who specializes in the treatment of anxiety. Yeah. Perhaps you need medicine. Sometimes people with health anxiety are afraid of taking medicine, but antidepressants can be extremely helpful. And they are certainly worth a try if you're not getting better. Like if you've done all the work and you've done it effectively and correctly, and you're still not improving, then medicine might be going on an antidepressant might be the answer. I've had people they're in therapy and they've done a great job, and maybe they are like 70% better, but they want more, and so they start on an antidepressant, and that helps them to like 95% better. 100% better, and so they just needed that. They needed the medicine.
One of the things that when we were speaking earlier on, like the other day, was the will to get better. And now often with, say, health anxiety, it's got a purpose. Would you mind talking about that? The purpose of having health anxiety and the will to let it go.
So the purpose is to protect yourself. is to prevent death, prevent suffering, right? To make sure that you're alive for your spouse and your children. So it's a protective mechanism. It's a protective mechanism that has gone too far, where you are guarding against things that don't need to be guarded against. It's almost like if you had a car alarm that went off every single time a person walked by, as opposed to when someone's breaking in. You only want your car alarm to go off if someone's breaking in. You don't want it to go off if someone's walking by. So it's almost like someone's walking by and the alarm goes off. So that's just a hypersensitive alarm system. And so it's a protective mechanism, but what's happening is their protective mechanism is actually ruining their life. They're not living their life. They're suffering. And so there has to be a will to get better. And that's why you have to find a balance between trying to find a good balance between good health, physical health, and good mental health. Because if you're only focusing on one, then the other is going to suffer. Right? So people are preoccupied with the physical health at the expense of their mental health. And they have to learn that, okay, they have an anxiety disorder. Well, that's the disorder you need to treat. You don't have cancer. You don't have ALS. You have to treat the disorder that you have, which is an anxiety disorder.
You're making it. We're peeling another layer of the onion. Rose is mentioning something very vulnerable, very difficult, but that people. And I liked your answer. That people will bring on anxiety or bring on a condition to.
Yeah, like when your mother-in-law comes and your back plays up and you have to go to bed so you don't have to interact with her. I mean, I'm just using that scenario because it's such a simple one. So the back pain is your mechanism for escaping your feelings.
Yeah, I just wanted to repeat this again because this is profound, Ken.
Mm-hmm.
The anxiety is there because it's because I'm scared of death and it's keeping me from dying. Wait, you said it much better than me. Can you say it again?
Yeah, you don't want to die. You don't want to suffer. So you have to constantly protect yourself.
It's got to be pretty amazing to do that.
So go ahead. So I want to write this down because it's really profound.
You have to protect yourself from a fatal disease.
The anxiety is the protection.
Yeah, you have to protect yourself from a fatal disease happening. So you have to go through extraordinary measures. You have to be on guard at all times. You have to be hyper aware. And anything that's uncertain, you need to know what that is. I need to know, what is that? Why am I experiencing this? So any small thing that the average person would just ignore is a potential threat that they must find out immediately.
So it's fear of death that's the problem.
Fear of death, some people would expand that to they don't want to suffer. Like if they could die like this, I mean, they would be happy.
The fear of suffering. The fear of suffering causes suffering.
The fear of suffering and death, having a fatal disease and suffering with it. Yeah. So it's not like they're afraid. Like, for instance, I treat so many people with health anxiety. Very few of them had a fear of COVID. Very few. Some did, particularly the ones who had fears of germs, but it's mostly the other things. It's mostly brain tumors and heart attacks and cancer and all that.
Catastrophizing.
Neurological diseases, Parkinson's and dementia.
Yeah. So catastrophizing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Yeah. So in actual fact, the imminent disease is not going to bother them. The respiratory problems that COVID would bring isn't a problem, but the fact that they might get cancer out of it is the problem.
Right. So even though they know that COVID could kill them, because it has killed people before,
interesting.
It's not something that they're worried about. Like, that's not where their mind goes. Their mind is programmed to go to these big fatal diseases that have been around for a long time. And some people will have specifically a fear of cancer, a specific fear of heart conditions, and they don't worry about the other things. And some
Hmm.
people still worry about
So it's
lots of
yeah.
diseases.
So in actual fact, it's the worry is the problem, isn't it?
Worry.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So it's not so much the health anxiety; it's the worry.
Let's worry about your health. Let's worry
Yeah.
about
Do you think
because
that those people also worry about other things?
so some people will have generalized anxiety where they worry not just about health, they'll worry about lots of different things.
Hmm.
They'll worry about where
Yeah.
am I going to find a parking spot when I drive downtown,
Yeah.
and
Or it
you
might
know,
rain today and I've forgotten my umbrella.
yeah, they can have lots of different kinds of worries.
Hmm.
People can have other co-occurring, bless you, co-occurring anxieties, as you
Hmm.
know, like they
That,
maybe
that,
there's some social anxiety too. They can have depression also, along with it.
wouldn't they be a cluster? Wouldn't that be a cluster on the whole, in the main?
Yeah, but most of the people I treat with health anxiety just have health anxiety.
Okay.
Like that's where
So they
their focus
okay.
is.
So they don't worry about other things.
No, they can. I mean, there's no, you know, there's not a cookie cutter. Some people with health anxiety worry about lots of different things. Like for instance, I just talked to someone with health anxiety, and she worries about her son who is going to kindergarten who had asthma attacks 2 months ago, and now he's going back after being a month out of school, and will he get an asthma attack again? And so she worries about that. You know,
That's what I mean. That in my experience, the people that have got a health anxiety have got all these other worries as well, and it's just part of the cluster,
yeah,
the anxiety cluster. Yeah.
yeah, but they may not worry about like they'll be flying on a plane. However, yeah, they may not have any sort of fears of flying, but they might wonder, well, what if I have a heart attack on the plane? Or some people with health anxiety will worry about driving in areas where they're away, like away from urban areas, away from hospitals and medical facilities. They don't want to be too far from one of those. So
Mm,
sometimes it can manifest itself that way.
Wow.
mm, yeah. Yeah. So just to sort of gather it all together, health anxiety is is what's the take home message, as Tova would often say, for people that are listening to us now, from your perspective?
Well, if you're listening to this and it feels familiar and you've never considered health anxiety before, start learning about it because possibly the disease you fear is not the disease you have. The disease or disorder you have is health anxiety. So start considering that that is what you have and learn about it. I have on my website, kengoodmantherapy.com, I have 2 webinars about health anxiety. One of them, actually, both of them, are with people who have suffered with health anxiety, and they're on the webinar as well. So start with that, and just educate yourself. And I have health anxiety classes. There's many therapists who specialize in the treatment of anxiety who can be helpful. And start to consider that the disorder you have is health anxiety, and that is exactly what needs to be treated, which means you have to learn to tolerate uncertainty and tolerate discomfort. I don't know what
But
the symptom
how?
is.
But how do they tolerate it? How do they tolerate it?
How do they tolerate the physical symptom,
Yeah.
for example? Well, since most symptoms are transient, the vast majority of symptoms will just go away on their own. Sometimes you need to take an over-the-counter medicine.
Sometimes it's inconsistent, but there's still an answer. If it's consistent, it's ongoing. It's because your brain is completely in threat mode. So let's say it's in
So,
threat mode.
so let's say you get a physical symptom, and your immediate thought is, "Oh no, what is that?" And you have a rush of thoughts, and you feel anxious. It's like, okay, let's take a step back. Let's hold on. I have health anxiety. I have health anxiety. Let's just wait. Let's just wait. Let's see what happens. Maybe this will just go away. I actually will have people think back their entire life and write every physical symptom down that they can remember and what happened. Well, 3 columns. What the physical symptom is. Second column is what they feared it represented. Like they have a headache, they think it's brain tumor. And what happened. And the third column is what happened. And I'll have them try to remember all of the physical symptoms they've ever had in their whole life, and even ask their relatives, spouse, what do you remember? What should I add to this list? And what they inevitably find is that all of the symptoms just go away on their own. And they start to see a pattern like, well, I get these symptoms and they just go away. But there's always that uncertainty. The uncertainty is, well, what if this one is the fatal disease? What if this one is? And so now they're learning, okay, I have to just accept that, okay, I'm gonna just go based on history, and I'm just gonna wait a couple weeks. Let's see what happens. So I'm gonna focus on living my life. Let's just see what happens to this physical symptom. I'm just gonna live with the uncertainty. I'm gonna live with the discomfort and focus my attention on living life, not going online, not touching the symptom, not focusing on it, not looking in the mirror, not asking for reassurance. Because if you do those things, you're going to make it worse. If you Google your symptoms, if you keep checking on your symptoms, you keep checking your blood pressure, if you keep pressing on your body, you're going to make it worse. You're going to make the anxiety worse. You got to stop doing that and focus on living your life. And let's just see what happens. Now, most of the time, the physical symptom will go away. It's like, okay, if it's not away in 2 weeks, if it's worse, then I'll go to the doctor. So that could just be one rule of thumb that you go by.
See, now Lisa has called over 700 various places, and she's had her symptoms have been there for a year. So they're obviously, they're not just transient.
So I've worked with people who have many physical symptoms. There's usually a lot of physical symptoms, and I can think of people who they come to me and they've been through many medical exams, many medical tests. They've been to multiple doctors, and nothing is diagnosed. They have nothing medically wrong with them. And so the doctor finally says, well, this might be an anxiety issue. Maybe they don't even say that, but they just say there's nothing medically wrong with you. You've been through MRIs, you've had CAT scans, you've had everything, and there's nothing wrong.
Medically unexplained symptoms.
Right, but they still have all these physical symptoms, and they're scary. They're scaring them. So they come to me and they start considering the fact, well, maybe this is health anxiety. And so people will come to me with, they can have 10 different physical symptoms, everything from shaking to feeling off balance to fuzziness in their head, all these physical symptoms. And then by the time they're done with treatment, they have none of them. Like they were all products of anxiety in their imagination that was caused by anxiety. And that's, but it's hard to wrap your mind around that because it feels physical. So it must be something physical when it's actually not. It's an anxiety disorder. But anytime someone comes to me with physical symptoms and they've never had a medical exam, they've never been checked out for something, I'm like, well, you should probably get it checked out. Let's see, maybe there is something wrong. You should check it out. But then sometimes people are afraid of going to the doctor. They're like, well, I don't want to find out. Because if I'm going to find out that this is going to be a fatal disease, I don't want to go to the doctor.
People also, the majority of symptoms, the body heals. The body's made to heal. Let's talk about, that the body knows the solution before the problem. So medicine heals many things. It's these things, these chronic pains and chronic symptoms that are not responding that we are finding can respond to mind-body methods, to physio-psychological, methods to, Dr. Clark calls it stress illness. Dr. Schubiner and Dr. Schechter will call it physio-psychological disorders. I mean, and again, Rose and I have witnessed enormous in these last couple of years, people feeling from cancer and MS. And so that's this, the body can heal. And if somebody has a will and a desire and and the chemical reaction of hope and belief, they can live the life. You mentioned it in the story with the guy climbing the mountain. This is chemical. This was his own placebo. This was his ability to overcome adversity and live a life. And he had a physical, like, the phantom leg. His leg is gone, and so we're talking about many different things, but I think how I want to round up the show, and then maybe Rose wants to say anything, is let's also talk about that anxiety is not a bad thing. Anxiety helps us. Anxiety helps us. I cross the street. I have anxiety until I see that green light. Thank you, anxiety, for helping me. So it's about balance and understanding. And Rose and I teach people about relationships with themselves, the language, how do they speak to themselves, because people have disconnected from themselves with anxiety, like they don't know themselves. So Rose will talk about character change and evolving into and self-love. And so we're back to some of the methods of how we help people, which is very scientific. Rose, you want to...
No, you've said it beautifully.
Yeah. Very big mind-body connection that people don't realize, and they can do a tremendous amount by changing the way they think, and again changing the way they behave.
But it's them lifting them out of that old behavior, which is the issue, because they're trapped, and it's getting out and believing they can get out. And that's one of the things that we spoke about before, is that will to climb up and get out, because
that's right. Because if you have anxious thoughts, if you have worries, everyone, people with anxiety, they want their anxious thoughts to go away. They want the worries to stop. But those worries will not stop unless you stop your anxious behaviors. But if you continue to do your anxious behaviors, you will continue to worry. So you have to have, you use the word will, you have to be determined to stop these anxious behaviors. So let's say someone who has a fear of a heart attack, and so every day they take their blood pressure, they take it 10 times a day, every hour. Well, their fear of having a heart attack will not go away unless they stop taking their blood pressure. Unless their doctor says you should take it every day, you should never take it.
The thing is that what they should do is what?
Don't take your blood pressure. Sure. Like you don't do your anxious behaviors, because the anxious behaviors are propping up the worries, keeping the thoughts alive.
But we know clinically that the anxious behavior it feels as though it's unbidden. It feels like they didn't ask for it, but it's there.
So they feel like a victim of it?
Yes. So there needs to be a space for them to review that, doesn't there? So where do they get that space from?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by space, but whatever the anxious behavior.
To see that this is an anxious behavior of mine. This isn't me. This is an anxious behavior. Yeah.
Well, the way I teach is you're controlling your body, and your body wants, your imagination is telling you to do these things. Your imagination says, no, take your blood pressure every day, because if you don't, you could suffer a heart attack. And, you're like, no, I cannot do that, because that behavior is keeping my anxiety alive. So I'm going to put my blood pressure cuff deep in the closet. I am not going to be taking my blood pressure. And then people will start to see that once they stop taking their blood pressure, their anxiety begins to subside. But they have to tolerate the uncertainty, because the reason why they are taking their blood pressure is to be certain. They need to know that it's okay.
Yeah. So it's tolerating the uncertainty that they need to focus on, isn't it?
Yes.
So being able to tolerate and sit with the uncertainty, and that's the space that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That space.
Exactly.
And trusting, knowing yourself.
Well, that's another component, Tova, of it. Because first of all, you've got to tolerate, begin to notice that you need to tolerate it. And then you've got to bring in the trust. And of course, that's, like with ISTDP, that trust thing is based on your attachment bond,
right,
and whoever trusted you,
right,
so that you can actually build your own trust, because somewhere down the track nobody trusted you. And the lady with the tongue, for example, when you were telling me about that, I thought, I wonder who picked on her in the beginning that she decided to criticize herself, because self-criticism isn't something that's innate in us, is it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think people can be critical of themselves or not. I mean,
Yeah, that's true. But I'm just saying that what's that Jesuit thing? Show me the boy of 7 and I'll show you the man. It's something we've learnt in that beginning
True.
period that we're
yeah,
not good enough.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, because people with anxiety typically exaggerate problems and they underestimate their abilities. And so
Yes.
if the problem is enormous and you can't handle it, well, that's a recipe for anxiety right there. You have to
Yeah.
learn that, all right, the problems aren't big. I'm just catastrophizing and I can handle it. So that's what you're learning when you go to therapy is you can handle these things.
Yeah.
But it takes practice. It takes work.
Or it also takes noticing, observing your behavior, and that it's not you. It's something that sort of has been put on you virtually, and I mean, I just thought the lady with the tongue, she must have been self-critical before she noticed her tongue. Do you know
Well,
what
if
I
she has
mean?
an if she has an anxious predisposition,
Well,
and
that's
so
right. Yeah.
right, and then
Yeah.
you start and you create stories. I mean, kids are wonderful at creating stories, and so you create this really scary story, and you don't tell anyone, and the story gets bigger and bigger, and pretty soon you start believing it because it's happening all the time,
Yeah.
right?
So good
Yeah,
point. Such a
and
good
the same
point.
thing as an adult with fears of cancer and ALS and MS, and you create the stories and then you dwell on those stories and they feel real. Like I've had people so many times tell me I know for sure I have MS. I know. And they're terrified to go to the doctor. Not one of them has ever come back with any, and I treat a lot of people with health anxiety. I've never ever had anyone come back with any sort of serious fatal medical disease.
That's right.
Now I'm sure it's going to happen one day, but so far it has not happened. But it feels real. Like
Oh, yeah. As you say, it is real in the moment. Yeah.
yeah.
Ken, thank you for joining us.
Oh,
It's
you're
been
welcome. It was a pleasure.
pleasure having you.
That's interesting, Ken. You're way more interesting than I even thought. You're very interesting. Thank you.
Oh well, good. I'm glad I was interesting and entertaining.
No,
Hope
'cause
people learn
I
something.
wasn't sure. Like I wasn't sure because you deal with all these anxieties, but your health is behind a lot of them, and that's really what our audience is interested in. And anxiety is anxiety. Let's just call it what it is.
Yeah, and if people have health anxiety and they have other types of anxiety, whether it's panic or this is probably be a good thing. You can listen. You can download it. You can listen to 4 chapters for free just to see what it's like.
Very nice.
It covers social anxiety, panic disorder, all types of phobias, health anxiety.
Very nice.
Yeah. So check it out.
Very nice.
Fantastic.
Well, thank you guys for having me. It was a pleasure. It was great.
It's a
Yeah.
pleasure.
Yeah.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, any queries or any questions, please put it down. Follow our TMS Roundtable YouTube channel and put any comments or questions. We'll get back to our guests if you want us to. We'll do all of that, but you're welcome to contact us. And thank you, Ken, for being here with us.
Thank you so much.
This morning for me, this evening for Tova, middle of the day for you.
Have a wonderful
Isn't the
day.
internet amazing?
I'm just going to put up our flyer for people to see. So we're just going to say goodbye. And thank you. I'll send you the recording. The recording will be on our YouTube, and subscribe to that. Ken, you're number 142, our show tonight. And so we are blessed. And thank you.
Thank you very much. You guys have a wonderful day.
This up.
Thank you.
I'm going to take us down and say goodnight.